How to describe my experience with this particular film? I was about 14 when it first came out, and I kind of liked it. Alright, I freaking loved this movie when it first came out.
I was a huge Shrek fan when I was younger. Why? Well, we'll get to that when I talk about the movie. Didn't even see Monsters, Inc. till years later. In fact, I think I saw it on television for the first time.
This is only some of the stuff that I had from this movie. The stuff I could find from the basement. I bought this movie on VHS the day it came out. I went and saw every single one of these damn things in theaters before I was obligated to. Why am I telling you all of this? I just want to give you some context.
Some people might say that these two movies don't have enough in common to be compared to one another, and maybe that's true. I've heard and read comparisons like, oh, one's about a giant green guy with a furry sidekick, and the other's about a giant furry guy with a green sidekick, and they're kind of buddy comedies. But the real reason I finally decided to go ahead with this comparison rather than another one was these two films were the first two animated movies to be nominated for the Oscar for Best Animated Film. Prior to 2002, the Oscars didn't have an animated film category. This makes Shrek the first animated movie to win this Oscar. Because of that, I'm going to look at these movies together and tell you whether or not that should have been the case. Shrek is an ogre. Wow, that sentence sounds ridiculous now that I come to say it out loud. He lives in a swamp and is perfectly content to just do his own thing, which mostly consists of a lot of gross out gags that I guess some people find funny. Unfortunately, because he's an ogre, people tend to have a very generalized idea about him, which leads to a lot of confrontations.
Back, please! Back! I warn ya! Right.
Okay, that bit is pretty funny. Eventually, he's forced to leave the swamp and confront Lord Farquaad because a lot of fairy tale creatures are overrunning his swamp, having been banished from Duloc, and he is unwillingly put into role of hero because of it.
Attention all! Fairy tale things! Do not get comfortable! Your welcome is officially worn out. In fact, I'm gonna see this guy Farquaad right now and get you all off my land and back where you came from!
I like Shrek. In fact, I'm probably one of the few people who actually preferred his character to Donkey, or... well, Puss in Boots was pretty awesome, but you get my point. At the time that this movie came out, Shrek was kind of an interesting character, just because he wasn't what you would expect. He was ugly, he was kind of an ass, and the aforementioned grossness, which I could honestly do without. It's not that this concept hadn't been seen before, but this was one of the first times where they didn't seem to try to compensate for his ugliness by turning him into a handsome... that is a dude, right? Or making him like an absolute sweetheart. I admire DreamWorks for creating characters that endear themselves to you based entirely on their personality, and then also make it so that their personality is not perfect either, sort of like with Megamind. I will always prefer characters like this to characters like Ariel or Aurora. And that's not me saying that Shrek is better than those movies, that's me saying characters don't have to be nice and pretty to be likable.
Also, sarcastic characters do tend to win me over pretty easily.
Then there's Donkey, voiced by Eddie Murphy, and probably the fan favorite before Puss in Boots came along. He definitely gets the best lines in this movie, and he is delightfully irritating. It's nice when characters who are supposed to be kind of annoying don't overdo it. I don't know what else to say about him. He's comic relief. I can see why he's the favorite, but at the same time he was never really my favorite part of the movie. Fiona I actually still rather like, although I am really hoping a certain red-headed princess will set a new standard for outstanding female characters. Way back when I still had a really shitty mic, like a couple months ago, I mentioned that I liked Fiona as a character better than Roxanne from Megamind. That still stands. I think Fiona does grow a little more in the next movie, but I still kind of like her, and not just because of the ass-kicking. I actually like it when she's trying to be a standard princess. Honestly, some of the best satirical elements in the film come from her and Shrek, rather than all of the fairy tale parodies.
You should sweep me off my feet out yonder window and down a rope onto your valiant steed.
You've had a lot of time to plan this, haven't you?
But you can bet I'll touch on that when I get to the plot. Seeing her act like a princess is funny because it's so ridiculous, and honestly, her story is a bit more effective in terms of the moral of this film than Shrek's is. I also admire DreamWorks making her permanently ogreified because, again, this stresses that characters do not have to be perfect in order for us to like them, and I like Fiona more as an ogre. There are a lot of side characters that are mostly just parodies and aren't really all that important to this movie, so I'm not going to bother with them. So, finally, the villain, Lord Farquaad. He's okay. I think the villains in Shrek 2 are better. He's more of a joke than a threat, and he's really not even that funny of a joke. A shame considering how much I love John Lithgow. His whole deal is that he's short. What's so funny about being short? And he's not all that likable as a villain either. He's not scary, he's just kind of an ass, and not even in a fun way. I think that this was his best line in the movie.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Other than that, I like this guy better. Show this guy more, he's funnier.
But I do still like most of the characters, as long as they block out the existence of Shrek 3 and Shrek 4.
Sully is one of the main characters in Monsters, Inc., voiced by John Goodman, who always plays these roles pretty well. Sully is the top scare at a facility that collects children's screams because they can be used to power the city. Again, gotta give Pixar a hand for unique premises. Honestly, is it really even possible to dislike this guy? Seriously, I don't think it is. He's like a big, furry, clawed, sharp-toothed teddy bear. The friendship between him and Boo especially just has a huge awe factor and builds up remarkably well. Pixar is really damn good at making you believe that their characters have real emotions. Mike is Sully's assistant and he's caught somewhat in his shadow but doesn't actually seem to realize it. He also is dating a girl with snake hair and has a badass car. I can't say I like Mike as much as Sully, but he's still a pretty likable character as well. He's not exceptionally bright and he's a bit more selfish than Sully, but I think both characters balance each other out pretty well and they both get an equal amount of funny lines. Mike may get a few more because, like Donkey's sort of comic relief.
I think I have a plan here. Using mainly spoons, we dig a tunnel under the city and release it into the wild.
Spoons.
That's it. I'm out of ideas.
Boo is probably one of the most adorable children I've ever seen in an animated film. This kid is so freaking cute. And a fun little twist, despite the fact that monsters make a living scaring kids, they're actually terrified of the children themselves, in part because they believe all kinds of outlandish things about them. It is hilarious to see these big monsters scared of this little girl. I also like that they didn't give her some ingratingly cute lisping voice and made her communicate more like someone her age would.
That's right, Boo. You did it. You beat him.
It makes her a bit more believable as a child. There are a lot of other enjoyable side characters. This is Pixar after all. I love this chick and there's a fun twist at the end of the movie involving her. These nerd characters are pretty funny and so is Mike's girlfriend. And of course there's the abominable snowman voiced by John Ratzenberger, who seems to pop up in just about every Pixar movie. So again, we finish off with the villains. Pixar usually does a pretty good job with them too. This guy is pretty nasty. I can see the younger audience finding him kind of creepy. Randall is the second best scare at the facility and obviously not happy about that. He also happens to be Boo's monster. He has a sinister plan that will end the power shortage because it can extract screams directly from the human children, but also involves kidnapping them in order to do this. Mike and Sully try to stop him and appeal to Mr. Waternoose, head of the company and a friend of Sully's, only to find that he's in on it too.